Overtime here on WOTM. Mark, we're just a few weeks away from the Olympic Games over in Tokyo. Of course, the games were canceled last year. They're still calling it Tokyo 2020, and I kind of understand that because I've seen some Hall of Fames do that just to keep up with the theme as these things move forward. Before, as we look back, we don't want to look at it in an odd year. That part aside, Team USA's contingency going into Tokyo starting to take shape. Last night we find out the women that are going to represent Team USA in gymnastics, and gymnastics has been one of the more dominating sports at a Team USA. You see here the team being announced yesterday. Of course, we knew Simone Biles was going to be on the team, and she's obviously going to be one of the, I guess, even the most popular figures, not just of the gymnasts, but of all the athletes that are in Tokyo. But we also have one of the athletes that are going in that you see on your screen right there, Sunisa Lee, who's actually a Auburn signee, and she'll go to Auburn as a freshman after the Olympic Games. Now, one of the things that I find really interesting is that both Auburn and Alabama, there's a lot of Olympians that have ties to the state. From a big picture standpoint, how big is this for Auburn and Auburn's gymnastics program to have a member of, I don't know if they're calling themselves the Fab Five or whatever it was, they'll come up with some fancy name, to have representation like that for Auburn in the year that we have name, image, and likeness laws going into place in the NCAA. How big is this for the Auburn program to have somebody on one of the more, I guess, storied and more hyped part of the games? You have your swimmers, your track stars, and your gymnasts, I think, are the most popular athletes that are in any Olympic Games.
I don't know if you're old enough to remember the Dave O'Brien thing that they had in Reebok back in the early 90s. Those guys got so much commercial time, and that was a big deal. Yeah. And both of them kind of flopped out, never really did well in the, I think it was the triathlon or the decathlon or something like that.
Right.
So, and they were pushed. So if you do well and if you perform well, I remember Mary Lou Retton and guys like, or people that you never really heard of before, having key moments that took care of them the rest of their lives. Mike Eruzione, a guy that scored the game-winning goal against the Russians, he says, if that shot is 6 inches to the left, I'm painting bridges the rest of my life.
Right.
And I think if you have the ability to shine in the Olympics, it means special things. And like I know people think Auburn has an image problem because of Alabama, but I don't really think it doesn't really matter to me. Maybe I'm not from the state, maybe I'm not one to speak, but I think they've got a lot to be proud of. I think there's so many different sports that they represent themselves well in, and here's just another way for them to show how proud of a school they are and how many good athletes that they put out in a number of sports, not just football.
Exactly. So we'll take a look at the contingency going into the Olympic Games. We'll first look at former players from the University of Alabama that are going in, and I think it's really interesting that Justin Thomas represents the first player from the male side in golf that'll go in, because the game was introduced as an Olympic sport in Rio in 2016, and now here they are in 2021 going into it, and Justin Thomas is on that team. You see some of the other players on there. But I do think that, with this is former and current athletes for the Crimson Tide that are going into this Olympic Games. I think it's more interesting this year because, like we said, we have now ways for athletes to make money from their name and their name, image, and likeness. I don't think it'll be such a big deal in the games, but I do think it can be a big deal after the games, signing different, sponsorships and whatnot if they come back with some gold medals or medals just in general.
Yeah, you also got to remember, this isn't the most popular of Olympics.
Yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
You do well here, the next one is going to be very popular.
Exactly.
So that's going to set them up very nice.
Exactly. So you see both the American contingency and also those coming from other nations that are going to represent. You see Canada and the Netherlands. And we'll flip over on the other side. We'll see swimming, also swimming for Greece, swimming for Iceland and Kuwait, also swimming for Bulgaria, and also Karani James making yet another appearance in track and field. He'll represent Grenada, and Jareem Richards representing Trinidad and Tobago in track and field for the University of Alabama. Meanwhile, former Auburn players look like this. We see Sunisa Lee, who's not a former, she's a current player. She's a future signee, an Auburn signee, and she'll represent Team USA in the gymnastics games. Meanwhile, Annie Lazor of swimming, Zach Apple of United States Swimming, both will represent Auburn in the pool. Swimming also Ariel Sands, he'll represent the United States Virgin Islands, and also Rachel Dinikoff, the first female track and field athlete for the Auburn Tigers, coming up in the 2020 Olympic Games. So we'll have I think Alabama and Auburn fans will have a lot to cheer for over in Tokyo coming up in the next few weeks with the Olympic Games coming up in just a bit. Well, coming up next here on Overtime, one of the best players in the NFL, in the current generation of the NFL, has announced that he is retiring. We'll take a look back at his career. We'll also take a look at the upcoming Stanley Cup final. We'll have that coming up next here on Overtime.